this video, we will talk about the development of artificial intelligence. You will be introduced to some key vocabulary words that you should understand. This is a sabbatical project for the academic year 2024-2025 at Mount San Antonio College by Professor Kim Lalani Wynn. Since the 1950s, three big developments has taken place. One is the incredible increase in the storage capacity of technology information. And you may remember there was a time when a whole building was needed to store information. Now we store a lot of information in a little tiny thumb drive. Another development is the graphical processing unit, known as GPUs, as well as central processing unit, CPU. This in essence is the brain, if you will, of the computer. And last but not least, more recently, we started to digitize a lot of information, all sorts of information, because we have that increased storage space and we have our CPUs and our GPUs. So information are stored not just in text, but also in images. And specifically to healthcare, we started digitizing our health record. Okay, so we call that electronic health record, or EHR. Let's dive deeper into the brain or the black box of AI. I want to introduce the term deep learning models. When we say models, in this context of technology, we mean the mathematical algorithm to go from input to outputs. So this black box I referred to in the previous video explains a hierarchy of layers of processing. So if you follow along the picture, on the left-hand side, the input goes in. Each of those dots would be a input. And then through some kind of processing, some kind of mathematical algorithm, it would generate the next column of dots. And then that will also go through another layer of processing. So there are many layers of processing of information from the inputs, which then generate the next output. And that output would then be the next layer of inputs, and it gets repeated over and over. As you can see, it's a complicated process. Ultimately, though, at the final, after many layers of processing, the output will be generated on the right-hand side of the picture. That is the deep learning models. It's very much similar to how our brain works with the networking and the synapsing in our neurons in our brain to process information. The next term I want to introduce is natural language processing. Just like the title, you can imagine that deep neural network is now processing language. It doesn't matter if it's English or Spanish or French, the machine is able to understand the language and process the meaning of what is being presented as the input to generate the desired output. The next word I want to introduce is large language model. Now this is a subset of the natural language processing. Remember how machine can understand words now. So we're going to dive into a specific model to process one specific set of data. Now imagine, to really understand the language, you have to have an enormous amount of data inputs. And that's exactly what happened. That's why the word large, which I think is a misnomer. It should be gigantic rather than just large. So given this ability, the machine can now converse with humans because it's like another person you're talking to. An example of this would be the chatbot, like it's in robots. This is a review slide of what we have already discussed about the development of AI. Remember, we first started with programming, human programming for the machine to process. But then as early as 1950s, we started thinking about the possibility of machine learning. Now, because we were able to increase our storage space capacity enormously, and we were able to have the development of GPUs and CPUs, we are now able to digitize a lot of information and store it accordingly. Then came along the idea of deep neural network. That's our black box. We were able to then develop our natural language processing ability with the machine, and then develop large language model, the LLM. And now we are into the current time of AI.